Day off for many, but not all.
When people are getting shot and stabbed, that's when you kind of worry and say, you know, can something be done?
74 Springdale, the house with a record as long as your arm.
Welcome to a half-hour edition of Here and Now. Well, Danny Williams' Galway development will soon have its first residents.
That's right, one family is just weeks away from moving into their new home. Here and Now's Mark Quinn caught up with them, and he has this report.
Rick Green is on track to become one of Newfoundland's first Galwegians. An accountant, he's traveled around the world for work, living 10 years in British Columbia. He says green spaces here on the outskirts of St. John's remind him of what he had there.
Newfoundland is a different environment. The people are different, much more friendly, I find. But again, what they're creating here is very similar to what I've enjoyed in British Columbia.
Builders have been hard at work. There are plans to build roughly 5,000 more living spaces here. These homes are empty now, but Rick Green hopes that one day they'll be filled with new neighbors. And then there's this, 160,000 square feet of Costco, one of Atlantic Canada's biggest Costcos, snatched from the east end of the city, with a view of Signal Hill to boot.
Costco wasn't a big driver for us.
Back on Galway Boulevard, work is coming along at Green's new home. The Greens hope to be moved in by the end of March. He estimates this bungalow will cost more than $600,000 by the time it's done. Other two-story homes on the same street will cost even more. Green is excited to be one of the first Galwegians, but at 61, he's not ready to say this will be his last stop.
The fruits of all my hard work now is turning out to be building this last house, as my wife says. I think it's probably my second last house.
Where do you think your last one will be?
I'm not sure. It all depends on who got the vision in the community that I may want to buy into in the future.
Green does expect to be living here this spring, but will he be here when the 5,000th Galway resident moves in? That remains to be seen. Mark Quinn, CBC News, Galway.
We'll soon be able to put names and faces to the people who are sharing that $60 million lottery jackpot. The Atlantic Lottery Corporation has booked the St. John's Convention Centre for tomorrow afternoon, and that's when the check presentation is going to happen. It's believed that more than 24 people from Conception Bay Central are the group that scored that big winning ticket. The Lottery Corporation says the $60 million is the largest lottery prize ever won in Atlantic Canada.
At long last, students here on the Avalon finally got a snow day. Schools, including College of the North Atlantic and MUN, made the call early this morning and stayed closed for the day. Government offices had delayed openings. Court in St. John's was closed, as were many offices. Students in the Burin and Central region also got a snow day. Many started the day with a shovel, including 80-year-old Stella Merkel of Gander and her 18-year-old pooch.
Wow, great shots there. And you know what? 24 centimeters. So lots to shovel there in Gander and still counting. This is what we are looking at as of 5:30 p.m. You can see 19 centimeters at the airport officially, 21 in the East End, 23 in Mount Pearl, 24 in Gander, 25 in Deer Lake. The snow has pretty much come to an end. Just looking at some additional flurries for the west coast of the island and up into places like Happy Valley, Goose Bay, coastal Labrador. Along that Atlantic coastline is where we're looking at some still additional snowfall to shovel for tomorrow morning when we wake up. These are totals for tonight and Wednesday, additional snowfall. From St. John's in the metro region, I think we're closer to 5 centimeters tonight, and then that snow will actually linger into Wednesday afternoon for places like Clarenville, Bonavista, up towards Terra Nova, Gander, Bonavista North. That's where we could creep into some of those 10 centimeter totals by the time we get through to Wednesday afternoon. Now, this was the scene, of course, on the highway today. Have a look at this. This was the trip out towards the Whitburn area, thanks to Nicole O'Brien. Now, the good news is your commute tomorrow morning, while it will be a little on the slick side in the morning, the afternoon commute's looking pretty good, and we'll talk about that with your full timeline details coming up with your full weather forecast in just a few minutes. Debbie?
Missing, a 7-letter word that haunts families searching for loved ones.
I always hoped for many, many years that she was going to be found alive, but I know now that's impossible.
If she was alive, she would be back to me now. That's the only thing that tells me that something's happened to her.
I'm Ariana Kelland. Last Seen is a new series on CBC Newfoundland and Labrador. 7 cases, 7 people who vanished. Hear their mysteries starting March 6th on Here and Now, cbc.ca/NL, and our YouTube channel.
2 suspects used an ATV to make their getaway after a bank robbery in Paradise this morning. Police say the pair held up the Scotiabank on Topsail Road around 10 o'clock. They used a weapon and were able to get away with some cash, but the RNC isn't saying what type of weapon was used or how much money they stole. The 2 were last seen heading west on the quad.
The fire department in Norris Arm is remembering one of its own tonight. 34-year-old Darryl White was the victim of Friday night's snowmobile accident in that community. Police are investigating just what happened. White's body was found around midnight near the scene of the accident. On Facebook, the fire department says White was their most dedicated firefighter, and a trust fund has been set up in his memory for his 8-year-old son.
Well, a player in the province's offshore oil industry is looking to get rid of its stake in the Terra Nova oil field. ExxonMobil confirmed today that its 19% interest in the project is up for sale. The company says the decision won't impact its other assets here. ExxonMobil has been a player in this region for decades as part owner of Hibernia, the first producing field in Newfoundland, and operator of Hebron, which came on stream a few months ago.
When the police responded to reports of a stabbing in downtown St. John's last weekend, it's a safe bet they didn't need directions. 74 Springdale Street has a violent history: break and enter, a car theft, a vicious assault, and a shooting. But it may surprise you just how many times the police have been there and the impact the house has had on people's lives. Here Now's Ryan Cook has this CBC Investigates story.
Just coming down here, the blue house there, 74 Springdale.
Josh Cook holds a grudge against the people who lived here. Cook pulled up to the house last January to deliver a pizza, but nobody in any of the 3 apartments said they ordered one.
And next thing you know, I just see the tail end of my car through the door open downstairs just take off up the road, and that's the point at which I realized that my car just got robbed.
Cook walked to the nearby hospital in a blizzard and placed a 911 call. But he wasn't the only one to make a call to police about that house. In a document obtained by CBC Investigates, the RNC says it received 111 calls about 74 Springdale Street in the last 3 years. And that was before a stabbing at the home this past weekend. Police are still investigating. Now, we spoke to the owner, Tony Pike, and asked why this house causes so much trouble.
I blame it on the justice system. I'll be honest with you. In terms, everyone needs a place to live. I mean, I have a lot of counsellors that back me up. Ron Ellsworth, who always said, Tony, people come off the street and you provide them with homing and housing. And I guess for the record, I mean, I do have a good track record. Unfortunately, this house has been exposed more so than anyone.
Pike says he has 63 tenants in total around the city and doesn't have many problems outside of Springdale Street. The home is perhaps most notable because of these people. Harold Noftel, Mabel Stanley, and a 16-year-old boy were all convicted of aggravated assault. They saran-wrapped a man to a chair inside their apartment last winter. When he tried to escape, the boy shot him with a sawed-off shotgun. It's these kind of things that have homeowners in the neighborhood fed up. Alex Power lives just down the street.
Another time came out of the house, there was 2 women on the side of the house that were beat up, trying to hide from someone in that house. I guess there's always something with that house.
And all that police activity leaves Power with a question for the landlord.
When people are getting shot and stabbed, that's when you kind of worry and say, can something be done?
After last weekend's stabbing, landlord Tony Pike is asking the same thing. But he says it's not a question for him, it's a question for the justice system. A system he says doesn't support people who have problems with drugs, especially people who have nowhere to go when they leave prison. Ryan Cook, CBC News, St. John's.
It's nearly a year and a half since the mass protests at Muskrat Falls, but many of those arrested are still waiting to face judges in both provincial and Supreme Courts. Here Now's Jacob Barker spoke with some of them about being caught up in a court process that never seems to end.
It's been about a year and a half since we saw this happen. 9 people arrested at the gate of Muskrat Falls, a spark that led to a large crowd gathering at the gate, and an occupation of the camp which led to dozens of people called to appear before the courts. Jacinda Beals was in that first group of 9.
Going through this court process has been very frustrating. I've never been involved in anything with regards to court before.
Beals, who was seen here receiving a summons to Supreme Court while appearing at Provincial Court last November, says it's been a stressful process.
We're in constant fear of this huge flood that could possibly happen at any time, you know, the methylmercury, but then to add the fact that we're having to deal with this in court as well. The stress of all of this is just completely overwhelming.
Eldred Davis was also in that original group of 9. His matters have progressed further than others. One matter he dealt with in Supreme Court ended with an absolute discharge that caused the Crown to withdraw a similar charge in Provincial Court, but he's not done yet.
Courts are so busy that they can't hardly manage, and yet they want to do a trial over something that's been resolved.
So this is the disclosure from Nalcor.
Beals hopes the same happens for her when it comes to charges canceling each other out.
That gives me hope in some way that some of it will be dropped.
They both feel the long process is a tactic used by Nalcor to scare people from speaking up.
It keeps us from doing what we want to do, is to protect our land, our lives, and nothing gets resolved.
They absolutely are afraid to speak out or to take any action because of court and possible jail time.
Nalcor says only 15 of 55 cases have been concluded so far, and though there were some delays in the beginning, it has worked with lawyers, individuals, and the courts to disclose information in a timely manner to ensure that things can get concluded as quickly as possible. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
I'm Peter Cowan, live at the House of Assembly, where the provincial finance minister just finished reacting to the federal budget. What will it mean for this province? I'll tell you coming up.
A couple from Ontario find food for the soul in the old abandoned church in Petite. Sunday at noon and Monday at 7.
This weather forecast has been brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. 5,000 kilometers of groomed trails are waiting to be explored. Embrace winter today.
Well, as Debbie mentioned earlier, a lot of people, certainly here in the Avalon, got a taste of their first snow day, thanks to you.
Well, oh yes, of course.
Winter
hold
has
your applause. Hold your applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Winter has arrived very late.
Yeah, it took a long time to get a snow day, and some are even questioning that snow day, of course. Now, I think for the kids, it was pretty greasy this afternoon on the roads. Better safe than sorry for the buses, certainly. There are still snowfall warnings in effect for St. John's, the Northern Avalon, the Burin, Clarenville, Bonavista, Terra Nova, Gander, Grand Falls, Windsor, and Conegra, and these are really the areas where we have the chance of still seeing 5 centimeters or a little bit more. Show you that snowfall map in just a second. Center of the low is now almost, in fact, is now over the Avalon Peninsula, and we're going to be seeing, as it wanders to the east, some wraparound snow here still for that northeast coast down towards Conegra, the Burin, and the Avalon Peninsulas through the overnight tonight and into Wednesday as that low departs. The snow will start to become mixed with some flurries and freezing drizzle through tonight along the Avalon and then through tomorrow along that northeast coast. Again, generally 2 to 5 centimeters for southern parts of the Avalon, the Burin, up towards the eastern side of the Northern Peninsula, maybe even places like Mary's Harbor, and then 5 centimeters for places like the Baver Peninsula and also the Northern Avalon. I think will be closer to 5, and then better chances of 10 centimeters, maybe even creeping into some 10 to 12, even 15 centimeter amounts, places like Bonavista North and Gander, where that lingering trough line may hold on a little bit longer for tomorrow as we roll through. Watch as your timeline plays out here. Here's Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. We are still seeing some gusts in that 50 kilometer per hour range for St. John's. Winds are going to be again in from the north, so it's going to be not too bad out there. Really not looking at blowing snow, but certainly a little bit of drifting in exposed areas. Do keep that in mind for your Wednesday morning commute, where winds early on will be a little bit on the breezy side. We'll continue to taper off through the morning. We're looking at generally gusts in the 30 to 40 kilometer per hour range for most of the morning, and then temperatures dropping all the way to -20 in places like Labrador City, -12 in Nain, -14 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. That's some cooler air that's coming in on the other side of this low temporarily. Now watch Wednesday afternoon. Winds again still generally light, but still watching that light snow hanging on along the northeast coast. It will be easing, but it's certainly on the menu. So again, more snow to battle for the drive home. Places like the northeast coast and central. St. John's, I think it's going to be a pretty smooth drive home for most of the metro area for tomorrow. Very quiet in western Labrador tomorrow, some flurry chances. Watching Thursday, we're going to be seeing these flurries coming in from this basically a warm front that's backing in from the Atlantic, and that will have temperatures on the rise, and we will see near freezing mark with flurries mixed with some freezing drizzle late day. Over to some drizzle and freezing drizzle for Friday. And as I mentioned last night, this relentless northeast flow that is going to be setting up Thursday, later Thursday, mainly Friday, Saturday, Sunday, into Monday, even Tuesday. And watching this big system next week. It does look set to stay offshore for now, but certainly keeping an eye on that one. It will help to prolong this northeast flow, though. Lots of zeros and ones on that temperature board. That is a marine flow at its finest, and lots of pack ice going to be moving into that north coast and northeast coast of Newfoundland as well. Labrador, again, temperatures on the rise as that marine layer flows into your neck of the woods as well. More on this in the coming days, Anthony.
Well, Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau brought in yet another high-spending budget this afternoon. The projected deficit, $18 billion this coming year, with no balanced budgets on the horizon.
Mr. Speaker, by making smart investments today, the kind that give more people a real and fair chance at success, we can build a forward-looking economy.
Improving conditions for women and Indigenous people are two big themes in this budget. The feds want to bring more women into the workforce as well and spend more on new parental supports and measures to promote pay equity. Plus, more cash for clean drinking water on reserves and $1.3 billion for First Nations Child and Family Services. So what does the federal budget mean for this province? Well, here now is Peter Cowan, joins us live from the House of Assembly. Peter, Finance Minister Tom Osborne has just finished speaking. What do you have to say?
Well, yeah, Anthony, if anyone here was kind of hoping that some of that big spending would mean some financial relief for the province here, you're probably out of luck, because there aren't any real specific programs that are tailored to Newfoundland and Labrador and the fiscal situation here. Some of those programs you mentioned, of course, will benefit people in this province. Additional things like, for example, there's money for broadband infrastructure, which the hope is that some of that will trickle down and help some of the communities here that still don't have high-speed internet. But I asked Tom Osborne exactly what he thinks this budget may do to help the financial problem, and here's what he said.
The National Pharmacare program will, once that becomes a reality. The fact that it's very clearly on the federal radar is something that provincial premiers and health ministers have been asking for 15 years. So the fact that that's now on the radar and it's closer to reality will be a big benefit to this province, I hope. Once we see the details, we'll be able to say for sure.
Of course, the big question is, how long will it take? It's going to be a couple years before they even have a recommendation, let alone a pharmacare plan in place. And then the question is, how much is the federal government going to expect the province to chip in to any sort of plan? So that's still down the way, but of course the next thing that the finance minister is going to be preparing for is his own provincial budget. And he gave us a little clue today. He said we're about 4 or 5 weeks away from that, which means we're looking at the end of March or beginning of April when the province rolls out its own budget. Reporting live from the House of Assembly, I'm Peter Cowan for Here and Now.
Aww.
Always love to see kids out enjoying the weather, and this is exactly what's on the go here. And I'm not sure, let's give you the clue that it is somewhere in Labrador, though that might be a pretty big clue. And certainly a big group here, and if you can guess where this is.
Some of our people in the control room
yes.
from Lab West say
they know where it is.
It's a great shot.
Sweet picture. glorious Burgeo Highway is not for the meek, but it's worth the drive for what you get at the end. An unspoiled outport. Stories from Burgeo in the coming weeks on Here and Now.
It is time now to introduce our young athlete of the day, and this is Lucas Russell. Lucas is 7 years old and lives in the St. John's area.
He enjoys time on the ice playing the forward position with the Timbits Green Novice B hockey team.
Nice work, Lucas. You're today's young athlete of the day.
Well, here is a festival where there's business in the front and a huge party in the back.
Named the Mullet Lord. For some weird reason.
I've had mine since 1972, so most of the guys I'm competing with probably weren't born then.
Oh my goodness, this is a festival devoted to the mullet.
Correct.
It was held over the weekend in the Australian mining town of Kurri Kurri. This isn't for the bald or brush cut crowd, of course.
Not by, it looks like he hasn't cut that since 1970 or whatever. 150 people were judged on their hairstyle, presentation, and stage presence.
Those crazy Aussies.
Of course, there has to be beer. A man with the nickname Shag, and I hope that means something different in Australia, he took top honors and the award of greatest mullet of all.
Okay, then.
Yes, yeah. There was also, and Ryan will love this, there was something unexpected in Rome's weather forecast yesterday. Snow. Sister Mary Frances, this group of priests at the Vatican made the most of it, taking a pause from prayer to pelt each other with snowballs.
It's just a few centimeters of snow, but a number of schools and subway stations were closed yesterday as a precaution.
Saw those Vespas covered in snow
Yeah,
there? Wow.
that's a very rare event for Rome, obviously.
Lots of snow.
Certainly a novelty and getting everybody kind of giddy.
Trees,
For sure.
Trees all bent over from the snow. It's kind of odd, eh?
I can't really think about anything but mullets at this point.
Did you ever have one?
No.
Oh,
I had a rat tail when I was a kid, though.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah, it was the thing in grade 3.
You missed the mullet era.
Yeah, I did, unfortunately. That was fantastic. The Mullet Lord was my favorite. I can't believe he didn't win. Anyway, I digress. Our viewer picture of the day, you know what? Mullets would keep your neck warm in Lab West. Like the scarf you never have to take off. Now, this picture, our switcher director, Rod Dobbin, his home country in western parts of Labrador, Wabash, is where he's from. And of course, this is the Menahek Nordic Ski School. And great group of kids there. Debbie Wellen sharing this great picture. Love to see the kids, even when it's cold, bundling up and getting out and enjoying the outdoors. And that looks like a great ski school there. They always have the kids out.
They always, they develop great cross-country skiers, a very competitive, provincial, and at the national level as well. It's a wonderful area. And they really know how to enjoy winter. You got to get out there, bundle up. You got the snow. Blue sky usually.
You were in the big land recently. Did you get to go skiing or anything like that?
No, but I did get to ride in a Cometech, which is way better. So, and by the way, that footage, we shot so much footage, it's going to take forever to edit, but it will be on in the coming weeks on Here and Now.
That's
so
going to be
stay
great.
tuned.
Should mention also, we're back to an hour, off for the Olympics a bit. Today was the budget, but for the foreseeable future, Here and Now is back to 60 minutes.
So join us for a full hour show tomorrow. Have a great night, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow.
Wonder if we'll have mullets on the show tomorrow.
No.
Hope so.